Today's training is collecting and maintaining student performance data in Niihka. There are several different ways that you can collect data through the assignments tool, through the discussion forums, through tests and quizzes. Today's training, though, is going to be how you maintain those records and how you allow students to view those records. And the tool that we use to do that inside of Niihka is the gradebook. And so that's what we're going to be covering today. So what I've done is I've actually opened up and gone to a test course that I have created. I have no students in this class. I just created the class this morning for a different training session. So it is going to be a fresh look at the gradebook tool. We'll go through how to set up your gradebook initially, how to add items and categories, how to enter actual grades, how to release those grades so students can see them, and then some additional features that you have with the gradebook as well. Because there's only 3 of you, feel free to shout out any questions you might have. We're going to be very informal, so don't hesitate. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to, on the toolbar down here, I'm going to click on Gradebook. If you ever get into a Niihka site, whether it's yours or whether somebody enrolls you in the site and you don't have a gradebook link on the side, that likely means that the gradebook tool itself is not turned on in your course. And so you can turn that tool back on by going to Site Info at the top and then clicking on the Edit Tools menu. That's how you turn that on or off. So as I mentioned, this is the first time I've gone into the Niihka gradebook. So this is always going to be the first screen that you see when you enter the Niihka gradebook. It essentially says at the top, Set Up Gradebook. Okay. Once you finish these settings, you will never see this screen again unless you choose to. Okay. What you'll notice right now is that we've got this white area over here. We've got some options over here. But what you're missing are the student names. And that's because they're being covered up by this setup wizard over here. Okay. So once we're done, the setup wizard will go away and your list of students will appear. All right. At the top, the first thing you can set is the gradebook name. Personally, I'm not sure why the gradebook name is there. You're only going to have one gradebook in your class. Where this does come into play, though, is if you decide to export your gradebook into an Excel spreadsheet, for example, the name of the gradebook will be in the file name. So if you're teaching 3 or 4 different classes and you download all those spreadsheets, you'll be able to differentiate which course is which. Okay. Most people, I would say, at this point don't download their gradebooks into spreadsheets until the end of the semester. And then they store it in a folder with all the rest of their teaching materials for posterity or archives. So for the sake of this, I'm going to go ahead and leave this just as gradebook, as it says. The next thing you can choose is whether or not you want to grade using categories. Okay? Categories are essentially folders in which you can put individual items into. Okay? There are 2 types of categories you can do. You can do just regular categories, which is what I just described to you. And then you can also do weighted categories. And weighted categories allow you to create a category, for example, that's called tests. And maybe you have 3 or 4 tests throughout the semester. They're all in that category. And then you can tell Niihka that one test category is worth 40% of the student's overall grade. And Niihka will do all those calculations for you if you choose. Okay. For the sake of right now, I'm going to leave categories. I'm actually going to change this to remember what it says, just categories. I'm not going to choose weighted categories right now. We will come back and I'll change this over and then I'll show you how to set up weighted categories also. Okay. So that's set for categories. Grade using, this is what do you want to be entering into the gradebook as far as individual grades go. Are you going to grade using points, percentages, letter grades? We always recommend points. Okay. Basically, because if you're planning on using the discussion forums tool or the assignments tool or the tests and quizzes tool, and you want to have Niihka automatically send those grades from those tools to the gradebook for you, it will only do that using points. Okay. You can set the other things if you're planning on just entering in grades manually, but we do always recommend points. It's just easier for calculation purposes. Okay. There's a checkbox right below that is scale extra credit. We're going to cover extra credit in its entirety at the end of the training if you're interested. Some people don't really care about extra credit at all, but for right now we're going to go ahead and skip that option. The last section that you have is display to students. And these are the things in the gradebook that you want students to have access to. Okay? This does not impact your view as the instructor. This is only impacting the students. Okay? So by default, we have released items. And a released item in Niihka is basically a graded item that you have said, yes, it's okay for the student to see how they did on this one assignment. Okay? It could be an individual test. It could be an individual assignment. But Niihka does not automatically release those grades for you. So you do have the ability to store grades in Niihka and then at some given point in the future, then release the score so students can see how they did. Okay. So released items is by default. Course grades is the other one you may want to consider turning on. That's basically their overall percentage in the class and letter grade in the class. Okay. Niihka does not by default turn that on, but you have the ability to do that. And I'm going to do it for the sake of this training.
How does it calculate percentage? Does it use your scale? Can you put a scale in there?
You can enter your own scale. By default, I believe it uses the plus-minus system, where 90 is an A minus, 89 is a B plus, that kind of thing. There are some preset scales that you can choose from, and then you can also select a preset to start with and then make modifications. Yes.
I use points also for grading, but I use the 200-point scales. Is that a problem?
So you have an individual assignment out of 200 points?
No. The whole total for the whole academic year or semester, sorry, is 200 points. And I divide it into this is 40 points maximum, this is 22 points, this is 5 points for a quick quiz. Is that okay, or do I need to go back to 100?
Nope, that's perfectly fine.
I prefer to keep the 200.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you have a question, John?
Yeah, if you're, let's say you're doing things on percentages, and you're halfway through the course, so half the grades in your final calculation aren't in there yet. How is it calculating the grade at that point?
What it does, it only grades based on the items that have been entered so far. So if you have 10 items in your grade book and you've only graded 4 of them, then it will only calculate their percentages or their final grades based on those 4 items that have grades in them. And so it will, if you're using weighted categories, for example, and let's say you've got a couple tests and a couple assignments are in different categories with different weights that haven't been entered yet, Niihka will take the weighting of what's in there already and use that as the 40% of their overall grade.
That's 100% of whatever's in there.
Correct. Correct. Okay. You can also show to your students some statistics. How mean, median, mode on the individual assignments, where they are as far as class rank goes, and you can show them statistics charts. In my experience, at least, it really clutters the screen for the students. So we usually recommend you turn that off. Again, that's only impacting the students, not you. You have the ability to see that stuff already. Okay. So once we're done setting up the gradebook, we can go ahead and click Save and Close in the bottom right-hand corner. This setup wizard will disappear, but if at any point you need to go back in and make alterations, you do have the ability to do that. And in order to do that, you're going to go up to, there's an Edit menu inside the gradebook. And if you click on Edit, the first option is Gradebook Settings. That is the setup wizard that we just went through. Okay. So what you should be seeing now, which you're not seeing on my screen, is a list of students in your class. Like I said, I don't have any in my class. Okay. So a couple of visual elements before we get into actually creating some assignments in the gradebook. On the right panel here where your students are located, you'll notice that it says category/points mode. That's how you know what you're grading using. You do also have some filtering options at the top here. So if you're teaching a large lecture class, or let's say you have a Niihka site with multiple rosters in it, if you're teaching 2 sections of the same class, you can then filter out certain individuals. So let's say, for example, I'm teaching 2 sections of the same class. There's a drop-down menu here where I can select which section I want to look at. And so it will only show you those students at that given point. If you need to search for an individual, you can do that here. And then you choose whether you want to search by their full name or their last name. The screen that shows your students defaults to only showing 19 individuals at one time. Okay. If you have more students than that, you have 2 options. You can either, right over here, page back and forth between your students, or you can just change the page size. Okay, so if you've got 30 students, you can change that to 30 and all of them will show up on one page. Okay. On the side over here, on the left panel over here, we have where it says gradebook, and there are currently 0 points in the gradebook. But there's also another tab over here that says attributes and grades. And if we click on that, there are several checkboxes of things that we can see if we choose to. Checking on these checkboxes does not impact the student view, it only impacts your view as the instructor. Okay? So if I choose to turn on letter grade, for example, it will show me the letter grade of all of the students in my course, but obviously the students in the course won't see other students' grades. Okay? And it also does not necessarily mean that the students have access to their own letter grades. That's only available to your students if you turned on course grades in that setup wizard. Okay? The nice thing to keep in mind about these checkboxes is if I were to turn all of them on, which I'll go ahead and do right now, you notice that the screen starts to get a little bit cluttered over here. Okay? Because every time I check on a checkbox, a different column appears. Okay? It's going to be the same way as you're entering items in the gradebook, but you can choose at any time to hide a specific item from your view. So let's say this were a gradable item. If I'm done entering grades, I can turn that off. The grades are still in the gradebook, but you're not necessarily looking at that column at any given point. A lot of instructors don't like to scroll left to right. They'd rather just do up and down. And so they turn off all of the columns in the gradebook that they don't need. Usually they just leave the student names and that specific assignment that they're grading. Just simplifies the view for them. Okay. Any questions on the general layout of the gradebook? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn off most of these things that I had on. That should be good. Actually, I don't need email either. All right. There's one item in the gradebook that I have not yet commented on, and that is the grade override. Okay. That's really not going to come into play until the end of the semester. Okay. The way that works is Niihka will automatically calculate their grades based on the point values, the percentages that you're entering. Let's say at the end of the semester you have a student who's got an 89.4, and you want to give them an A minus. Okay. That's what the grade override is going to be for. Basically what it does is in that field you just type in A minus, it overrides the calculated grade so that when you send your grades to Banner at the end of the semester, it's that A minus that goes to Banner, not the B plus. Okay? But it doesn't remove the calculations from Niihka. So you're still retaining that student data, you're not inflating their scores, you're just overriding their final grade in the class.
Does Niihka have the ability to enter the final grades to the registrar?
Yes. Yes. That's been something we've been working on for quite some time, and we ran into some technical issues at the end of last semester, even though it was technically available. I'm hoping we have those bugs worked out so it will work from this point forward.
In the semester. Do you know change of grades? Are those going to be built into this as well? Or?
At this time, no. We don't have any plans to do change of grades. Those are paper forms that have to be done and sent to the registrar.
Yeah,
so
I always wonder why they don't make that electronic.
Yeah.
It has to be signed at the level of the dean.
If it's a change of grade, if it hasn't been reported previously, it doesn't. But if it has been reported previously, yes.
If you change it, then it has to be signed by the dean's office.
Yeah, they'd look at
I don't know what they do.
Oh, I got a phone call 2 days ago. Yes, they do.
Okay.
So the next step is to go ahead and actually start adding items into your gradebook. Okay. And so in order to do that, we're going to focus on the file menu at the top of the gradebook. And if you click on the file menu at the top, right now I'm being given two options. And the reason I have two options is because I chose to grade using categories in my gradebook. If you chose no categories, which is the default, you're only going to see new item. Okay? And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a new category. And so it's asking me now, what is the name of this category? So I'm just going to call this assignments. Another feature of the category's ability is I already said that, but is the ability to drop the lowest grade in that category. Okay? So if you have that type of grading structure in your class, where you might give them 10 quizzes and drop the lowest one at the end of the semester, Niihka will do that for you. Okay? And so I can, projector's going a little funny, but I can choose to do that right now by clicking, in this drop lowest box, just typing a number 1 or 2 or whatever the case may be.
Okay.
I turn this off really quick. Now, there is one caveat to dropping the lowest grade in the category, and that is when you're using weighted categories. Okay, if you have a weighted category, let's say we're back to assignments or something, and the assignments are overall worth 20% of the student's final grade in the class. Those items inside that category have to all have the same point value in order for Niihka to be able to drop the lowest one. Okay, because Niihka doesn't know if you're wanting to drop the lowest raw point value or the lowest raw percentage value. Niihka doesn't know that, and so in order to simplify things, you have to have the items being weighted the same amount in the category in which you're dropping the lowest score.
Okay, that may not work, I don't know. Okay, one of the things I do in all my classes is that they have one exercise that they need to do during the semester, a minimum of 3 of those. They are encouraged to do more than 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever they want, in which case only the top 3 counts and the other 1 are dropped. So I have students who do the minimum requirements, they do 3 short papers and that's it. I have other people doing 5, 6, 7 papers, rarely 7, but 4 or 5, yes. In which case I take only the top 3 grades. Can I do this with the drop lowest?
Are each of the papers worth the same amount of points?
Yep, it's on the scale, 20 points per
Then
paper.
yes.
Okay, I can do that. Draw the lowest.
Yep, so what you would do is, for those students who only did 3 papers,
Yeah.
for the papers they didn't do, you would give them a 0 in the grade book. And Niihka would look at that 0 and say, this is one of the lowest.
Oh, I get it. Okay, all right.
Okay, so if you have a total of possible 7 papers in your course, what you would tell Niihka to do is drop the lowest 4, so that only the highest 3 are calculated.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay?
Okay, I got it. Thanks.
John, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. The next set of, I'm not sure what's going on with this projector. The next checkbox you have is including grade. Do you want the items in this category being included in Niihka's calculated grades? Okay. Normally the answer is going to be yes. Are the items in this category extra credit? Again, I mentioned we'll cover extra credit at the end, so for right now I'm going to say no. And then do you want to release scores? That means, do you want to allow students to see how they did on every assignment inside of this category? Well, right now I don't have anything in the category because it's not even created yet. And let's say I want to delay when the students see their grades. So for right now I'm going to say no, don't release the scores. Once I'm done, I can click Add and Close. Okay, it takes me back to the main layout. Students on the right side, items on the left. What you'll see is now I have an item here that says Assignments. And next to it you'll see on mine a little -1. That's your indication that Niihka is dropping the lowest 1 score in this category. Okay, it's a little shorthand for you. Okay. I currently don't have any items in the category, so it's still out of 0. Okay. So what we're going to do now, if we wanted to create additional categories, we could do that. Right now, we're going to create an actual item to go inside that category. Okay. The process is almost identical. We're going to go up to the File menu in the gradebook and choose New Item. Okay. So we've got some similar options here for the new item. The first thing is, what is the name of the item? I'm going to call this Assignment 1. The next option is actually a drop-down menu where you select what category this assignment fits into. Now, if you end up setting up your gradebook in the future to not use categories, this option is completely gone. It's not there because you don't have categories. Okay, but I'm going to click on that and choose Assignments. What's the total point value for this single assignment? Okay, I'm going to mimic Pascal's and say it's worth 20. Okay. You can set an optional due date. That really doesn't impact anything in the gradebook, but it does show the students when they view their gradebook when the assignment was due. That's completely up to you, though. Then you have, do you want to include this in the grade calculations? Yes. Is it extra credit? No. Do I want to release the scores? Well, there's no scores in there yet, so I'm going to say no. And do you want to give ungraded no credit? Now be very, very careful with this one.
What does that mean?
What this means is, When I check that box, every student in my class who does not currently have a point value in that grade item automatically is given a 0. Okay. Now, the way Niihka works is, if you leave a cell blank, whether either they haven't turned it in yet, or it's not due yet, or you just haven't graded it yet, if the item is blank, Niihka does not calculate it into their final grade calculations. Okay. So at the end of the semester, if you have a bunch of blank cells, and they really need to be zeros, if you need them to give them zeros, they need to be actual zeros in the grade book. Okay. Otherwise, Niihka's just omitting them. Okay. After the case, let's say I start grading all these assignments and I'm done, and I've got 3 or 4 students who don't have entries, who don't have numbers in their grade. Okay, I'm assuming that means they didn't turn it in, so they get a 0. I would go back in to edit this assignment and then check this button so that those 3 or 4 students are given zeros. Okay, you could go back and do it by hand, give each one individually zeros, but if you're teaching a large class of 100, 150 students, that could be pretty time consuming. But this will do it for you. I've seen a lot of instructors who select this when they first create the assignment at the beginning of the semester, and the students start freaking out because they have a 0. They have an F in the class. Class hasn't even started yet. So I always recommend you wait to do that until you're absolutely done grading that assignment. Okay. So for the sake of that, I'm going to click Add and Close. Okay. So we've got something interesting happening in my gradebook right now. I have the assignments category. I have assignment 1 worth 20 points in that category. But it's still showing me that I have a total point value in my course of 0. Okay. The reason for that is because this assignment category is dropping the lowest 1. Since this is the only thing in there, Niihka is dropping it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a second assignment, and you don't necessarily have to follow this step. So now you see I have 2 assignments in the category, and Niihka is dropping 1, so the total point value on my course is 20. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. Any questions on adding items or adding categories? Okay. The next thing is we are going to cover weighted categories. Okay. So, actually, let me do one more thing first. Let me enroll a user in this site so you can see how this works.
Matthew,
Yes.
if you've already done a course grade book and you've got a bunch of grades in it and you want to change these items, can you do that, or do you have to rebuild the grade book?
Change them how?
For example, if you want to go to weighted percentages and you've just got unweighted points or something.
You can change the grading scheme so you can go between categories and now categories. What you can't do is you can't change from points to percentages, or vice versa. Okay, so what I've done is I've enrolled one person so you can see how entering grades in the gradebook works. What you'll see is I have a user here. They have no course grade because I haven't entered any grades for them. But I haven't checked either of these, so neither of the assignments are showing up on the right side. So I'm just going to grade assignment 1 for right now. And let's say this person got a 15 out of 20. Okay? Now, in order for, what you'll notice is that assignment 1 has a grade, assignment 2 does not, but it's still calculating a final course grade even though Niihka is set to drop the lowest 1. The reason that is because Niihka is omitting assignment 2 because there's no grade in it. Okay, so in order for Niihka to drop the lowest 1, then I need to give a 0 in there. So what you'll notice is now that there's grades in both of these, Niihka knows that assignment 2 is the lowest of the 2, puts it in red and puts a strike through it, meaning it's not being calculated. Okay. You can use tab and enter to move between people and items in the gradebook. I can't show that to you because I only have one person in here. But keyboard shortcuts do work a little bit.
Tab and enter.
Yes. Just one or the other. So tab will go, I believe tab will go left to right, and enter goes up and down.
Okay. Is that different on the Mac?
I don't believe so. Isn't that working?
Well, I mean, my tab goes up and down, but my enter doesn't do anything.
Yeah, same on this. But the arrow keys
But I
do
can
go up and down. And
You only have one item in the gradebook, so it can't go left to right anyways.
Gotcha.
So it may work once you add a second item.
Okay.
What was that, John?
actually, it doesn't. So tab does go up and down, and arrow keys go left and right, but not the enter.
Oh, okay. I must have had those mixed up. All right, so the next step is to do weighted categories, like I mentioned. So I'm going to go back up to the Edit menu in the gradebook and go to Gradebook Settings, because I need to tell Niihka that I'm using weighted categories now. Okay. That's the only change I'm making. I'm keeping it at points, so I'm going to hit Save and Close. And you're going to see a couple red marks on my gradebook now. Okay. Probably the most important of which is this error message here. Oh, what's going on with this projector? It's saying this gradebook is not correctly weighted. Okay. Because even though I've got it set up for weighted categories, I haven't told Niihka what the weight is for this assignments category yet. Okay. So if you double click on any item, you can edit that item. If you double click on any category, you can edit that category. So now I have an extra text box where it says percent grade. So what percentage is the assignment category worth in the student's overall grade in the class? I'm going to say 40%.
So edit category, where is edit category?
If you click on, if you hit close in the bottom right hand corner first, and then double click on the textual analyses, yeah, that's where you are.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So I put in 40 there. Now I have two options. I can either weight items equally, and that means that regardless of their point value in the category, if this category is worth 40% and I have two items, Niihka is going to calculate each of these two assignments as 20% of the student's overall grade. Okay? You can also, if you choose not to select this, then you can go into each assignment and set what percentage of the category it's worth. Okay, so you can do each one individually, or even if you have a test that's worth 100 points and a test that's worth 150 points, just based on the difficulty levels, you can have each of those be worth 20% of the student's overall grade, regardless of their point value. Okay, so that's what that does. You can also weight them by points. So if I told Niihka that assignment 1 was worth 50 points and assignment 2 was worth 25 points, then assignment 1 will be worth twice as much as assignment 2 percentage-wise. Okay, Niihka can calculate that for you. Right. For the sake of what I want to do, weight items equally is always the easiest. And what you'll notice is now that I've selected weight items equally, I can now drop the lowest in this category. Okay, remember that's a prerequisite for weighted categories. Okay. Now I'm still getting an error message that the gradebook's not correctly weighted, and that's because I've only accounted for 40% of the student's overall grade. So if I just go ahead and create another category, I'm going to call this one tests, and this is going to be worth 60% of the student's grade. And I'll weight them equally. Okay. So now I've got 100% of the grade accounted for, but I still have an error message. And the reason for that is because I don't have anything in the test category yet. Now I have no error message. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay. The next thing is we're going to go through some of the additional features that you can do inside of the gradebook. If you click on the Edit button at the top, underneath Gradebook Settings is Grade Scale, where you can actually edit what the grade scale is for your course. Okay. You'll see grade format is letter grades with plus or minus. That's the default. And so let's say I wanted to keep that structure, but I want to change what some of these percentages are. What you can do is, let's say, all right, A plus, you have to really get 100% or to get an A plus. Okay, that's fine. But an A minus, I want that to be a 92. That was a grading scale I had in high school. 92. If I had a 91, it was a B. Okay, really aggravating. But if that's how I choose to grade, then from a 92 to a 94.99 is an A minus, and then a 95 up. And Niihka automatically recalculates this so that an 87 to a 91.99 is the B plus. Okay, so you just have to enter what the lowest value is for each letter grade, and Niihka will calculate the rest for you. Okay, and then I'm just going to reset to the default. And as you're making these changes in live time, Niihka will show you the grade distribution in your course. Okay, so if you want to make those changes at the end of the semester, if you're curving the entire class, you can see where the distribution is. Okay. Do either of you have, or do any of you have TAs in your class? They're going to be doing grading for you in the gradebook? Okay, so there's two things you need to keep in mind when you have TAs using the gradebook. The first is, as the instructor, you have to turn on the section info tool inside of Niihka, inside of your course. Because the section info tool is what you will use to assign TAs to the section in your class. Okay, even if you're only teaching one section, you still have to do it. In that case, it's kind of a pain. But if you've got one Niihka site with 6 different sections in it, and there's a different TA teaching each section, it's much easier to just have one Niihka site and assign this group of students to this TA and vice versa, and so forth. Okay, so section info is to assign TAs to the sections. Then what you have to do is in the edit menu, there's greater permission settings. Okay, just giving somebody TA privileges in your class allows them to add things to the resources, look at all the students' blog posts, do a variety of different things. But as far as entering grades,
How'd you get that again? I'm sorry, greater.
yep, if you go to the edit menu,
Yeah.
greater permission settings is the third one.
Okay.
And so what I can do is, in this drop-down menu, I can choose a specific user. I don't have anybody in my course as a TA right now, so I can't really do anything. But that's where you would set that your TAs can use the gradebook. Some instructors like the TAs doing the work and then reporting the grades to the instructor, and the instructor is the one that enters the grades. So, okay. You can also, under the View menu, you could see a history of changes. So this is literally a history log of all the changes that have been made to your gradebook, including grades you've entered, changed, things you've added to your gradebook, like items and categories. Okay, so if you ever need to, if you've got a student challenging a grade, maybe you accidentally changed a grade when you were doing something rather quickly, you can look in here and see what the previous values were. Okay, it also shows you which student it impacted. You also have statistics. So you can see statistics on the overall course grades and then each individual item in your gradebook. Under the Tools menu, there's Import and Export. Those are the two that I really want to point out to you. If you're wanting to export your gradebook into an Excel spreadsheet or vice versa, you can do that. If you're going to import a gradebook into Niihka with a new gradebook item, for example, you can do that. There's a specific format that the name of the assignment has to be. Basically what it is, let me think of the best way to show you this. Let's do it in here. So if I were to create, let's say I was doing this in Excel, I would call this assignment 3. And then in square brackets, I would put the number 20. And that square brackets with the number 20 is the maximum possible points the student can get on that assignment. It's the equivalent of putting it in this point box, but you're doing it in Excel. Okay? So that's the ability to import and export. At the end of the semester, this last option is going to be of use to you. Send grades to Banner. Okay, you can click on that. It will walk you through the steps on how to do that. Basically, it will import over all the final grades for the course, and we'll take you into Banner where you can preview the changes before you hit finalize. Okay. If you ever have any questions about using the gradebook, let's say you forgot how to drop the lowest score, for example. There's a help link down here, which will take you to just a general help where you can type in some keywords and search for an article. Or, on the far right-hand side, there's a blue circle with a question mark in it. That will take you to the same help documentation, but will start you in the gradebook. Wait. Yeah. So it takes you directly to gradebook specific articles. Okay. And then if you look on the side down here under gradebook where we are, these are all the articles about what you can do with the gradebook. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to revert my gradebook back to no categories. And I'm going to make everything be as easy to follow as possible so that I can explain extra credit to you. Okay? So I'm going to go into Edit and Gradebook Settings, and I'm going to turn off categories and save and close. Okay. And I'm actually going to turn on all of these things. Alright, so I have no categories now. And over here I have 3 assignments. Well, 2 assignments and a test. 2 of which have scores entered and 1 does not. Okay, so now I'm going to add an extra credit assignment. Let's say I offered an assignment to the students and said, if you go to this current event and do a 1-page synopsis, I'll give you 10 extra credit points. Okay? Now let's add the item to the gradebook. If I go up to File and New Item, just like I did before, I call this Summary Extra Credit. The maximum possible extra credit points they could get, I'm going to say is 5. Doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to get 5 for doing it, but that's the max they could receive on this. The only thing I'm going to do differently down here is I am going to check extra credit. Okay, so what you'll see over here is you've got Summary Extra Credit in green. That indicates it's extra credit. It's also a +5 in points, indicating that's extra credit. Okay? So now, what I'm going to do is I am going to, let's say this person gets 5 extra credit points. Okay. So the question is, 5 extra credit points, how does that impact their overall course grade? Okay. So let me do, basically the way this works is we have chosen not to scale extra credit. Okay. In the gradebook setup wizard, there was that checkbox at the bottom that said scale extra credit. We did not check that box. What that means is that when Niihka calculates the student's course grade, they have 15, 20 points they've earned out of a possible 20, 40, 5. Okay? Because there's no grade in here, Niihka omits this. Okay? So that's where it's getting 50% from. Okay? Now, if I were to go in and choose scale extra credit, the way that would work is this extra credit would be worth less because they've earned 15, 20, total points out of 120, 140 out of 145. Okay? So, at the end of the semester, whether you've chosen to scale extra credit or not, you should end up with the same result. Because by the end of the semester, there should be grades in every single item, and it shouldn't make any difference. The question is, how do you want extra credit to impact student grades leading up to the end of the semester? There's no right or wrong answer. I've seen instructors want to do it both ways. That's really just a decision that you have to make. Okay? Does that make sense?
A little bit. I'm a little confused. So does that mean, for example, if you had 100 points for all your assignments and you add 5 points extra credit, then that means that the total's out of 105?
No, out of 105, no. It'd still be out of 100,
Okay.
but the 5 points is being added to what you've earned,
Okay.
then being divided by 100.
Okay, so it's
You
2 extra
add-
credit.
you add like 80 out of 100 becomes 85 out of 100.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I'll do is let me go ahead and edit this so it's out of 60. Okay, so I have 100 possible points in my course. 20, 80, 100, plus there's a possible extra 5. Okay, so this person's earned 20 out of, I can't read it because it's projector's going in and out. 20, 45. But if I were to go ahead and click on scale extra credit, it would do 20 points out of 100 points.
Oh, I got you.
Okay.
It's scale for the whole grade,
Basi-
not just extra credit.
Correct. It scales it across all items entered in the grade book, whether there's a grade entered or not. That's what that does. Okay. Any questions? Okay. The one thing that we have not covered yet, and I have not covered it on purpose, is how, I don't have any of those handouts with me, is how extra credit is applied to weighted categories. Okay. Because it's actually rather complicated. Basically, the basic version is that any student in the gradebook cannot earn more than 100% on any individual item. Okay? So for this assignment 1, this person could not have received a 25 out of 20. Niihka will not accept that. So in this instance, what you can do is create assignment 1 out of 20 and then have an extra credit item worth 5 points and apply it that way. So an individual item cannot be worth more than 100%. In a weighted category, or in any category, rather, a student cannot earn more than 100% in a category either. Okay? So if I have a test category, or let's say an assignment category, and I have 3 assignments in there, and the student has earned 95% out of 100% of that category, and they do a 10-point extra credit assignment, only 5 of those points are going to apply because they cannot get more than 100% in that category. Okay. A lot of instructors don't like that because they want the extra credit to be applied to the entire grade, not just that specific category. Okay. Now, there is a way to do that so that the extra credit is applied to the entire total grade. And the way to do that, let me go ahead and edit my gradebook settings again. I'm just going to choose regular categories just to make things easier. If I go ahead and I create a new category, I can mark everything in this category as extra credit. Okay? So the way that works with weighted categories is I may have the assignments category worth 40%, the test category worth 60%, and an extra credit category that can be worth an additional 10% on top of everything else. Okay? That's how you handle that if you want extra credit to be scaled against the entire semester grade if you're using weighted categories. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. That brings us to the end of the training. So those were all the topics that I had covered. Just one additional point, if you're using the test and quizzes tool, or the assignments tool, or the discussion forums tool, and you have them set to be graded items, Niihka will automatically create those items for you in the gradebook. If you're using categories or weighted categories, though, you will have to go in there and tell Niihka which category it belongs in. But to do that actual grading, for example, if you had a test or quiz that you were grading, you would actually do that grading in the test and quizzes tool, and Niihka would automatically send that grade to the gradebook for you. Okay, so you don't necessarily have to do the grade entering inside of the gradebook itself.